There's a photograph from earlier this year that tells you almost everything about how King Felipe and Princess Leonor actually relate to each other. It's not from a state dinner or a balcony appearance. It's from the cockpit of a Pilatus trainer aircraft over La Manga del Mar Menor, father and daughter mid-flight, Felipe briefing her the way one pilot briefs another. Afterward, there's video of the two of them on the tarmac, him with his arm around her, both of them laughing at something only they heard. That's the real relationship. Not distant. Not formal. A father who spent 3 years of his own life training in exactly the branches of the military his daughter is now finishing, walking her through the same experience step by step. So let's be upfront about something before we go any further, because the title of this video makes a claim, and claims deserve scrutiny before they get repeated. There is no reported defiance. There is no documented fight between Felipe and Leonor over a relationship, a marriage, or a love interest. Nothing in the verified record, not Spanish state coverage, not the royal household's own statements, not a single credible outlet, describes an actual clash between the king and his heir over anything resembling a romance. The videos circulating with titles like this one aren't reporting an event. They're borrowing the shape of a very old royal story, the rebellious heir, the disapproving king, and pasting Leonor's face onto it, because that story is dramatic and the truth, right now, isn't. But here's why we're not just going to stop at false. Next video. Underneath the fake headline is a real and genuinely interesting question, and it's worth asking honestly, as a hypothetical, clearly labeled as one. If Leonor ever did fall for someone her father had real reservations about, what would actually happen between them? Not constitutionally. We've covered the legal mechanics of Article 57.4 elsewhere on this channel, but personally, as a father and a daughter, inside a family that has already lived through one full generational rupture over exactly this kind of issue. Because Felipe knows more about that particular kind of family pain than almost anyone alive. To understand why, you have to go back to Felipe's own path to the altar, because it's the closest real precedent this family has, and it shapes everything about how he'd likely handle a moment like that with his own daughter. Felipe met Letizia Ortiz, a television journalist, in 2002, and by Spanish royal standards it was an unconventional match from the start. She wasn't nobility. She'd been married before, to a schoolteacher, and divorced. She'd built a career in broadcast journalism, a public-facing, opinionated profession about as far from the traditionally quiet role expected of a royal consort as you could get. When their relationship became public and then serious, there was real hesitation in parts of the Spanish establishment, quiet, the kind that doesn't always make headlines but present. And Juan Carlos, by most accounts, didn't stand in the way. He and Sofia welcomed her. They married in Madrid in 2004, and Letizia has been queen for over a decade now. The lesson embedded in that history, if you're looking for one, isn't royals must marry royals. It's closer to the opposite. This specific branch of this specific family already broke that old assumption once, publicly, successfully, within living memory. Felipe is not a man positioned, by his own history, to suddenly demand his daughter meet a standard he didn't meet himself. That matters enormously for the hypothetical we're building here, because it changes the shape of what defiance would even look like. If Leonor someday brought someone home that raised eyebrows, the realistic version of that story isn't a shouting match or an ultimatum. It's something quieter and, honestly, more consistent with how this family has handled every difficult moment of the last decade. Careful, private conversations, probably mediated as much by Letizia as by Felipe, weighing constitutional exposure under Article 57.4 against the personal cost of repeating exactly the kind of rigid family control that damaged the monarchy under Juan Carlos. Felipe has spent his entire reign trying to be the corrective to his father's era, steadier, more transparent, less scandal-prone. Publicly punishing his daughter for a private choice would cut directly against the image he's spent 11 years building. And that image building matters here, because it's not abstract. Felipe ascended in June 2014 after his father's abdication, inheriting a monarchy that had just been through Juan Carlos's affair with Carina Zusain-Wittgenstein, the elephant hunting scandal in the middle of Spain's recession, and a wave of public anger that nearly reopened the Republican versus monarchist argument the 1978 Constitution was supposed to have settled. Philippe's entire strategy since then has been discipline and restraint, marrying that same instinct for control to genuine modernization, letting Leonor train in the military the way he did, sending her to UWC Atlantic for her education rather than keeping her cloistered at home, having her swear the constitutional oath in front of the full Cortes on her 18th birthday in a ceremony designed to project competence over mystique. A father who built that entire strategy around openness is not a father who benefits from a very public, very old-fashioned fight with his daughter over who she loves. If anything, the incentive runs the other way, to handle it privately, generously, and fast, precisely so it never becomes the kind of story this video's title is pretending it already is. There's also the Juan Carlos precedent hanging over all of this in a much darker way, and it's worth naming directly. Leonor's grandfather left Spain for exile in August 2020, and the fracture between him and the rest of the family has only deepened since. Reporting has described him as effectively kept at a distance from his granddaughters, with limited contact and real, documented tension between him and Letizia specifically. Whatever the precise mechanics of that estrangement, the outcome is visible. Leonor has barely been photographed with her own grandfather in years. That's the family's most recent object lesson in what happens when a member's personal choices and the institution's need for control collide badly. It's not a lesson about romance, it's about scandal, money, and trust. But it's exactly the kind of rupture Felipe has every reason to want to avoid repeating with his own daughter, over anything, let alone something as sympathetic as who she chooses to love. So if we're going to responsibly answer the question this title is asking, would Leonor ever defy her father over love? The honest answer is that we don't know, because nothing like that has happened, and there's no reporting suggesting it's on the horizon. She's 20. She just finished 3 years of military training across all 3 branches of the armed forces, becoming the first heir in Spanish history to do so. She's enrolling this September at university in Madrid to study political science, a decision that, by every account, was made collaboratively with her parents rather than imposed on her. Every publicly available data point about her current life points toward a young woman who's spent her adult years so far in barracks and classrooms, not courtrooms of the heart. The fake romance videos aren't wrong because they're mean. They're wrong because there's no event underneath them at all. What is real, and what makes this an honest video rather than just a debunk, is the structural tension sitting quietly under the surface of this family for the next several decades. Felipe himself pushed against convention once and the institution absorbed it. Juan Carlos, in a completely different and far more serious way, pushed against the institution's expectations and the institution eventually pushed back hard enough to send him out of the country. Leonor is inheriting a monarchy shaped by both of those outcomes at once, proof that personal choice can work, and proof that it can also end in exile, distance, and years of damaged trust. Whatever she eventually decides about who she marries, she'll be making that decision with both of those stories sitting in the room with her, whether her father ever says a word about it or not. That's really the story worth telling here, not a fight that hasn't happened, but the weight of 2 very different family precedents that will shape whatever choice Leonor eventually makes, whenever she makes it. If you want the version of this channel that tells you the difference between the two, instead of just handing you whichever one gets more clicks, that's exactly what we're going to keep doing here, so if that's useful to you, stick around and subscribe, because there's a lot more of this family's real history still to unpack. I'll see you in the next one.